Hello, my name's Lex. They say every family has secrets, but mine didn't just keep them, they celebrated them. They threw a baby shower for my husband's mistress, with champagne, with toasts, with applause. While I stood in the back, holding the silence they handed me for years, they called me dramatic when I stopped smiling, ungrateful when I asked questions, and when I finally spoke, I didn't raise my voice, I raised my pen. You ever wonder what happens when the quiet one stops playing along? Sunday dinners at my in-laws' house always came with a stomachache, never from the food. Vera, my mother-in-law, was an excellent cook. Her lasagna had won awards at her church's fall festival, and she made sure everyone knew it. But the real menu was unspoken, thinly sliced sarcasm, a generous helping of passive aggression, and the kind of judgments you could feel before a single word was said. That evening was no different. I pulled into their long, manicured driveway in Charlotte right on time. Not early enough to seem desperate, not late enough to be accused of disrespect. I'd spent the last 45 minutes in my own kitchen finishing the casserole Vera asked for, specifically mentioning she didn't have time to make a real side dish this week. I smiled when I handed it to her at the door, but she barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, good," she said, glancing at the covered pan. "You didn't forget." "I never do," I replied. The house already buzzed with the familiar mixture of Vera's curated classical playlist and Dorian's siblings' laughter echoing from the dining room. I stepped inside, placed my shoes neatly by the rug, another unspoken rule, and made my way to the table. That's when I saw it. A new seating arrangement. Instead of being next to Dorian as usual, my name card had been moved, set at the very end of the table, by the swinging kitchen door. Convenient for fetching more wine, maybe, or clearing plates, but hardly a place of honor. My husband's new seat was now beside Astria, his sister, and their younger cousin from Atlanta, who had a booming voice and a love for gossip. I said nothing. I simply sat down. That's the thing with long-term humiliation. It doesn't always come with screaming or slammed doors. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's a polite reorganization of chairs. Dinner started the same as it always did. Bowls were passed, wine was poured, and small talk circled the table like a well-rehearsed play, until Vera raised her glass and turned her attention to me. "We were just talking about grandkids earlier," she said sweetly. "You know, Lex, it's been, 7 years now. We keep praying. Maybe one day you'll surprise us." The chuckles came lightly at first, just a few. Astria smirked into her napkin. Dorian cleared his throat and refilled his wine. I smiled back, thin as parchment. "Maybe. What I wanted to say was, we both know your son had low motility counts 2 years ago. What I wanted to say was, you've never asked me once how I feel about having children. What I wanted to say was, I was pregnant once, and I lost it, and none of you noticed I didn't show up for dinner that week. Instead, I stared at the roasted carrots and nodded. Later, after dessert, I excused myself to the guest room to check a work email, my usual retreat when the pressure started to press into my lungs. The room smelled like lavender and dust. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened my phone, and that's when I saw it. Tagged on Facebook. It was Dorian, smiling. Hand on the rounded stomach of a woman I'd never seen before. She was young, brown hair, soft curls, wearing a blush dress that made her look like spring itself. The caption read, "Excited to meet our little blessing." I stared at it for a full minute before my brain could process anything else. Then the comments loaded. Vera, so proud of you both. Astria, family growing stronger. My breath caught somewhere between my ribs. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, but instead I set it down carefully. My fingers trembled. My lips parted, then pressed shut again. No one had mentioned a baby. No one had even hinted. And here they were, congratulating them. I wasn't sure how long I sat there, but eventually, the sound of laughter downstairs broke through the static in my head. I smoothed the creases in my dress and stood, the same way I'd done 1,000 times before, holding together the version of me they preferred. I walked down the hallway. Every footstep felt like a mile. In the kitchen, the dishes had been stacked neatly, and the casserole I brought was scraped clean, as if I'd never touched it. I picked up the dish, rinsed it quietly in the sink, Then I turned around. Dorian was leaning against the counter, scrolling his phone. He looked up, surprised to see me. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I just looked at him. And for the first time in 7 years, I didn't see my husband. I saw a stranger, wearing the face of someone I used to believe in. His mouth opened, just slightly. Maybe to explain, maybe to lie. I smiled at him, but it wasn't the kind he was used to. He didn't say a word, just blinked like he couldn't believe I was standing there. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a scene. I rinsed the casserole dish, dried my hands, and walked out of the kitchen without another glance in his direction. That smile I gave him, it wasn't for him, it was for me. The kind of smile that marks the start of a shift, not a breakdown, not a blow-up, but the moment a woman stops pretending she doesn't see what's always been there. A week passed, and I kept my routine. Because that's what good wives do. They show up, stay calm, carry casseroles and silence, and I still had a role to play. Or at least, that's what I told myself the morning Vera called, asking if I could come early to help set up for the Sunday brunch. Her voice was clipped, like always, but there was something extra this time. A note of cheerfulness so forced it made me pause before answering. "I'll be there in 30, I said, even though I already knew I was coming. Even though I'd already baked lemon scones the night before. It was a warm morning, that kind of southern spring heat that lingers in your clothes before noon. I arrived at their house, same as always, wearing a blouse Vera once said made me look respectable without being flashy. She liked women who stayed in the background, but dressed like they might marry well. Inside, the kitchen was already a mess of ceramic platters and polished silver. I set down the scones, washed my hands, and started tidying up the dining area. Vera flitted in and out, directing from the hallway, always managing to disappear when there was actual labor involved. It wasn't until I was dusting the family altar, yes, they called it that, an elaborate display of framed black and white portraits and heirlooms beneath a golden crucifix, that I saw it. Tucked discreetly behind a photo of Dorian's great-grandmother was an ivory envelope, thick and expensive, embossed with gold foil. The kind of envelope you don't just leave lying around unless it's meant to be seen or hidden. I hesitated for a second, then I pulled it out, slid my finger under the flap, and read the card inside. "You are cordially invited to a baby shower in honor of Bryn and baby Devane, hosted by Vera Devane and Astria Monroe Private Brunch, the Elmwood Garden Resort. Please RSVP by Friday." I read it again, slower this time, trying to process every curve of the letters. Bryn and baby Devane. My name wasn't on the list. There was no mention of me, not as wife, not as guest, not even as an afterthought. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. What I felt wasn't rage. It was colder than that. It was the kind of chill that wraps around your bones when you realize something's been taken from you long before you even noticed it was missing. I slid the invitation back behind the frame. As I finished polishing the altar, I heard voices from the back of the house, Lilu's laugh echoing in that joyful way kids have when they're unguarded. I followed the sound into the sunroom, where Vera had set up a play area for the little ones. Lilu, Astria's daughter, was sitting on the floor with 2 other cousins, coloring. "Hey there," I said softly, crouching down beside her. "Are you excited to meet the new baby?" She nodded, her eyes lighting up. "Yeah, Daddy says she's gonna be my new mommy too." I froze, smile still fixed on my face. Astria, who was leaning against the doorframe sipping tea, stiffened. She didn't look at me, didn't say a word. Harland walked past behind her, catching just enough to know what was said. He paused, long enough to register the tension, then kept moving like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just heard his granddaughter announce my replacement. "I see," I managed. "That's very exciting." Lilu kept coloring, unfazed. To her, there was no drama, just new titles, new roles, swapping out one name for another. Easy. I stood slowly, my knees aching more than I'd admit. "I'll go finish up the kitchen," I said to no one in particular. In the kitchen, the timer on the oven beeped. I took out a tray of Vera's quiches, careful not to burn my hands. I moved on autopilot, setting the table, folding napkins, arranging fruit. I smiled and nodded and made all the appropriate small talk with passing guests as they arrived. No one mentioned the invitation. No one mentioned Bryn. but I saw it in the glances, the way people avoided my eyes, the way Vera never left me alone in a room with anyone for more than a minute. Around noon, the brunch began. I played hostess without a title. Made sure plates were full, coffee was hot, chairs were tucked. When it was time to leave, I rinsed my hands again, grabbed my purse, and stepped onto the front porch. The sun had climbed high, and the air was thick with humidity. I stood there for a moment, invitations still tucked in my bag, and let it all settle. Not one person had walked me out. Not Dorian, not Vera, not even Harland, who used to hold doors like it was a moral obligation. I stepped off the porch, heels clicking against the stone pathway, and walked to my car. As I started the engine, the invitation shifted slightly inside my purse. A soft rustle, like paper remembering it had weight. That woman, Bryn, they were throwing a party for her. She carried his child, but I was still carrying the silence they had handed me, and I finally realized it was heavier. I didn't cry on the drive home, not when I turned the key in the ignition, not when the invitation in my purse made a soft thud as it shifted with the curve of the road. The silence inside my car wasn't just absence, it was containment. I didn't blast the radio to drown out my thoughts. I let them sit with me, loud, ugly, familiar. That night, I made myself a cup of tea, peppermint, the only thing that didn't twist my stomach these days. I curled up on the couch with the lamp on low and my phone face down. Dorian didn't call. I didn't expect him to. He had other things to do, apparently. Things like planning a baby shower for a woman he'd never mentioned but now was hosting a party for. A party his whole family was throwing. The next morning, Astria texted me, "Coffee this week. Just us. Nothing serious. Promise." It felt like bait, but I bit anyway. We met at a quiet coffee shop she liked. Modern, sleek, tucked between a yoga studio and a real estate office. It was the kind of place people came to look productive, where oat milk and loyalty programs meant more than the actual coffee. She was already seated when I arrived. Hair styled in her usual effortless bun, nails freshly manicured, a faint vanilla scent lingering in the air. She stood to hug me, awkward, stiff, like we'd forgotten how, and motioned to the empty chair across from her. "Lex," she smiled, tilting her head like she always did when trying to seem disarming. "You look well." "I manage," I said, taking my seat. We ordered, exchanged pleasantries. She complimented my earrings, asked about work. I answered in short, polite sentences, sipping slowly, watching her eyes scan me for cracks. Eventually, she got to it. "You've always been so composed, even when things are chaotic. That's something I've always admired about you." I raised an eyebrow. "That so?" She nodded. "You know how some women fall apart, make scenes, air dirty laundry? You've never done that. You've always been elegant." I waited. She wasn't done. "I just think," she said, lowering her voice, "that with everything going on, it's important to remember we're family, and families have complicated seasons." There it was, the polite poison, the carefully crafted guilt. "All families have secrets, Lex," she continued. "It's how we handle them that matters. Let's just keep this graceful, for everyone's sake." I held her gaze. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to be understood. I was just watching. She stirred her coffee, pretending not to notice the way my silence stiffened the air. I finished my cup and stood. "Thanks for the coffee," I said, placing a $10 bill on the table. "Next time, try honesty. It tastes better." She didn't reply. The walk to my car felt heavier than it should have. My feet moved, but my chest throbbed. Not from rage, but recognition. That conversation, it wasn't meant to comfort me. It was a warning, a leash made of compliments. Back home, I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door and stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the photos lining the shelves, wedding pictures, holidays, fake smiles that now felt like wax figures at a museum I never agreed to visit. Something inside me shifted. I walked to the bedroom, pulled down an old box from the top of the closet. It was one of those memory boxes people keep tucked away. Pictures, cards, letters, the things you only open when you're feeling brave or broken. I sifted through them slowly. A card from Dorian, before we got married, where he wrote, You calm me in ways I can't explain. A picture of me holding Lilu the day she was born. A hospital wristband. And then, one memory I had buried deeper than the rest. 4 years ago, the kitchen. It had been a Sunday, like so many others. Lilu was still a baby, and I had reached out to hold her while Vera fussed with the mashed potatoes. The baby had reached for me first, little arms outstretched, that gummy smile lighting up her whole face. I'd smiled back, eager, stupid. But the moment I touched her, Vera slapped my hand away, not hard, but with enough force to stop the room. "Don't," she hissed. "You don't touch a child with unclean energy." I remember blinking. "What are you talking about?" She didn't answer. Instead, she spat into her own palm. Then, without hesitation, she wiped it across my wrist. "There," she whispered. "Now you're cleansed." I stood frozen. My mouth opened, but no sound came. I looked to Dorian, who had just entered the room. Our eyes met, and then he turned and walked out. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't question it later. He never brought it up again. And neither did I. Until now. I put the memory box away, but the past didn't go with it. It sat with me that night as I washed dishes, folded laundry, moved from room to room like a ghost. By midnight, I was in the kitchen, standing in front of the window. The reflection staring back wasn't mine, not the version I had worked so hard to perfect, not the woman with polite smiles and silent grief. It was someone else. Someone watching, waiting. I whispered, just loud enough to hear it outside my own chest. What if I don't keep the peace anymore? And for once, the quiet didn't answer back. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid. Fear had left me a long time ago, slipped quietly out the back door after years of being ignored, replaced by something far colder. It was the kind of stillness that follows realization, when you're no longer shocked, just adjusted. By the time morning arrived, I had already made a to-do list, the same kind of list I used to make for holiday dinners or budget meetings. Only this one had a new column, proof. Around noon, I was in my home office, sorting through old tax folders and warranty documents. There was dust everywhere. I hadn't opened that cabinet in years. Part of me didn't want to, but if I was going to begin peeling away the layers of lies they'd wrapped me in, I had to start where they never expected me to look. My own neglect. That's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I nearly ignored it, but something told me to check. The message preview was short. "I'm sorry. I thought he was separated. He said he still cared about you." I unlocked the phone, heart steady. The full message confirmed what I already suspected. "Hi Lex, I hope this doesn't make things worse. I just didn't want you to be blindsided. I really believed he was separated when we met. He said your marriage was more of a partnership than a relationship. I'm truly sorry. Bryn." There was an attachment, a baby registry, crib, monogrammed blankets, champagne flutes with Mama and Daddy etched in gold. Due date, October. I didn't text back. Instead, I forwarded the message to a new email folder I'd created just that morning. Evidence. D. Short. Clean. Just like my intentions. I stared at my own reflection in the black screen after the phone went dark. It didn't look like me. Not the me they expected. Not the version that swallowed insults with wine and kept secrets even from herself. Later that afternoon, I moved on to the hallway closet. It wasn't organized like the others. It held random boxes, old receipts, manuals, some expired coupons, and a fireproof envelope I barely remembered sealing. It was tucked behind a shoebox labeled Winter Scarves. I pulled it out, sat on the floor, and opened it slowly. Inside were 2 documents I hadn't looked at in years. One was a lease agreement from our first apartment, the other, a fertility report from Dorian's urologist. I remembered that day vividly now, how nervous he'd been, how I'd reassured him that no matter what the results said, we'd figure it out together. I remembered how quiet he was afterward, how he came home with a 6-pack and no appetite. I unfolded the paper. Patient, Dorian Devane, sperm analysis, 87% motility impairment. Diagnosis, conception unlikely without medical intervention. My eyes didn't even sting. All those years I let Vera plant whispers in my ear about my bad luck womb. The monthly jokes about my quiet ovaries. The Christmas toast where she winked and said, "Maybe next year we'll have a real miracle under the tree." I had believed it. I let it chip away at me, because I thought love meant swallowing some things whole. Now I knew better. I scanned the paper, saved a PDF copy into the Evidence D folder, and then emailed it to myself with the subject line, Truth number 1. That night, I didn't cook. I didn't clean. I sat with a glass of ginger ale and opened a private browser tab. First, I looked up a divorce attorney. Not just any firm, I needed someone familiar with corporate shielding, asset tracing, and non-disclosure tactics. I bookmarked 3 names. Then I opened the county property records. I typed in our address, then his name, then mine. Only one came up, and it wasn't mine. I wasn't surprised, but I took a screenshot anyway. Next, I pulled up our mortgage company's client portal. Dorian handled that account. I used to trust him with it. I typed in the password I used for everything back then. It didn't work. I tried the second one. It didn't work either. The third attempt locked me out. I opened a new folder, Financial Trail. I noted the lockout time, the IP denial notice, and moved on. I wasn't angry. I was documenting. By midnight, I had 3 folders, legal, financial, and emotional. The last one held screenshots of social media comments, family texts, and things I'd heard whispered around corners. Words like, "she's probably infertile," and, "honestly, they were never a match." I labeled the subfolders, gaslight, dismissal, and replacement. At 1:30 a.m., I shut the laptop, stood up, and walked to the bathroom. I washed my face, not like a woman removing her makeup, but like someone rinsing off years of someone else's fingerprints. As I patted my face dry, I caught my reflection again. This time, I recognized her. She wasn't scared. She wasn't weak. She was ready. I walked back to the office, reopened the laptop, created a new folder, and named it. Final. The next few days moved like the tick of a slow clock, steady, deliberate, and loud in its own way. I didn't change much on the outside. Still went to work. Still smiled at the receptionist in my office building. Still answered family group texts with the obligatory thumbs up emoji. No one suspected a thing, and that's exactly how I wanted it. Then came the backyard barbecue. Astria, ever the social diplomat, had decided to throw a divine summer kickoff at their home. She called it a way to reconnect the family, which really just meant, let's gather under one roof, pretend everything's fine, and pretend Lex never found that baby shower invitation. It was a Saturday. I arrived on time. Again, habitual, even when I shouldn't have bothered. Vera waved at me with a pair of tongs, flipping burgers in her sun hat and pearls, like Martha Stewart with a grudge. Dorian was already talking to someone near the beer cooler, laughing too loud. The seating was informal, but somehow my chair had made its way to the far end of the yard, next to the kids' table and a portable fan that buzzed like an insect with an attitude. No one said it aloud, but I got the message. Bryn was there, wearing a pale blue maternity dress that clung just enough to make sure everyone noticed. Someone had tied a little ribbon above her belly, like she was a gift to be unwrapped. Dorian introduced her to guests one by one, smiling, hand on her back. When he brought her over to Harland and a few of the old family friends, he said, "This is Bryn. She's been a real light in our lives." A real light. I watched from the sidelines, plate of potato salad untouched, as Harland chuckled and said, "Well, you sure know how to pick 'em, son." Then he looked toward me, raised his beer, and added, "No offense, Lex. You've always been helpful, kept things running." The implication was clear. I was logistics. Bryn was legacy. A voice behind me whispered, "What does she even do anyway?" Laughter followed. I didn't bother turning around. Instead, I stood up, set my plate down without a word, and walked toward the house. I passed Vera, who called out cheerily, "Leaving so soon?" "Just grabbing some water," I said without breaking stride. Inside, I leaned against the kitchen counter, closed my eyes, and let the ache settle. It wasn't the kind of pain that brought tears anymore. It was different. Heavier, yes, but also clearer, like steel being forged in a flame. And I realized then that this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about erasure. That evening, back home, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and every login I could remember. I started with the basics: banking, mortgage, investment accounts. The first few passwords didn't work. Some portals were locked. When I finally got into a shared credit union account, the balance was lower than I remembered, and my name wasn't attached as a co-owner, just as authorized user. Next, I pulled up property records, the house we shared. Only Dorian's name on the deed. Even the lake house his parents had gifted to us. Listed under a trust, Vera's name, followed by Dorian's. Nothing had my name on it, not a single thing. I sat there, stunned, staring at the screen. Not from the discovery, but from the audacity. They had counted on my silence, assumed I'd never look, assumed I'd never question. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel, an old friend who worked in mortgage compliance. I'd sent her a message earlier, just to ask a hypothetical question. She had replied now with a PDF attachment and a simple note. "Sorry, Lex, you're not on anything. Never were." I read the message again. Let it hit. Not sadness, precision. The next morning, I asked Dorian to meet me for brunch. Neutral ground. A public place. No raised voices, no slammed doors, just clarity. He arrived 5 minutes late, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky. He sat down, ordered a mimosa, and leaned back like we were on a second date. "You look nice," he said, eyes scanning the menu. "Been a while since we've done this." "I didn't come to reminisce," I said. He smirked. "All right. Business then." Our drinks arrived. I didn't touch mine. I looked him in the eye. "If this continues, I'll act. I suggest you prepare." He set down his glass. "Lex, don't be dramatic." "I'm not." "You don't have to play the victim," he added, leaning forward as if proximity gave his lies weight. "We can work this out." "I'm not interested in working it out." "You think you'll win in court?" he asked. "You have no idea what you're up against." "I do now," I said, "and I suggest you read the prenup again, slowly." He didn't respond. I stood up, pulled a 20 from my purse, placed it on the table. That's your warning," I said. "Lex?" "No scene," I interrupted. "No begging, but don't say I didn't give you a chance." I walked out, back straight, step steady. No one followed. On the way to my car, I passed a couple holding hands, laughing about something dumb and light and innocent. It reminded me of us once, before expectations calcified into control, before silence became currency. I slid into the driver's seat and exhaled. That was all he was going to get from me. One warning, one chance. Everything after that, that would be mine. The warning I gave Dorian wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. I didn't raise my voice or slam a door. I didn't send follow-up texts. I let my words settle, like dust on a glass table, quiet but undeniable. And like all things that live in denial too long, I knew they'd try to wipe it away. But I also knew I wasn't bluffing. 2 days after that brunch, I was in my bedroom closet searching for a gift bag to bring to a friend's engagement dinner when I saw it, tucked into the back, behind a stack of scarves I hadn't worn since our anniversary trip to Asheville. A clear garment bag. Inside it, my wedding dress. I hadn't touched that dress in years, not since I packed it away after our first move, still believing in the future it symbolized. Now, the fabric was duller than I remembered, the satin slightly yellowed with time. But it was intact, stitched, structured, heavy with memory. I pulled it out and laid it across the bed. As I unzipped the side seam to check the condition, something crinkled. A slip of paper, folded in half, hidden in the bodice lining. My breath caught. It was my father's handwriting. "Lex, you are not meant to disappear. You are meant to decide. Love, Dad." He'd written it before he passed. I remembered the moment now, how he'd surprised me by helping the tailor with a last-minute fitting. I never knew he left me something that day. I sat on the edge of the bed, dress in my lap, that note burning in my palm. My throat was tight, not from sadness, but from clarity. My father had seen what I was trying to become for everyone else, and still, he left me that line. A quiet push toward who I used to be before all this. Pretending. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I turned on the sewing machine I hadn't used in 5 years and began altering the dress. I removed the train, tightened the waist, changed the neckline, added structure to the shoulders. In 4 hours, what once looked like a bride's promise now resembled something else entirely, a sheath of sharp white silk, modern, minimal, and unapologetic. Not a beginning, a conclusion. By morning, I had ironed it, hung it up, and laid the envelope on top, the one that held the papers. Divorce filing, asset declarations, and subpoenas for withheld financial documents, all signed, sealed, and dated. I didn't RSVP to the baby shower, of course not. I didn't need an invitation to the fire I used to keep burning. I was the one who'd built the damn hearth. The resort was less than 30 minutes from town. Vera had chosen it. Elegant, discreet, all-white interiors, long chandeliers, and minimalist florals. It was the kind of place that said, "We're tasteful, but expensive." I arrived 10 minutes after the posted start time, just long enough to make an entrance. The valet took my keys without question. I stepped into the lobby and walked straight through the glass doors that led to the reserved event hall. The moment I entered, the room froze. Conversations halted mid-laugh. Glasses stopped mid-air. Even the string quartet in the corner lost rhythm. There I was, wearing white, and not the kind of white they wanted to see. I didn't flinch. I didn't scan for approval. I found Dorian's face first, then Vera's, then Bryn's. Vera stepped forward, lips stretched into that strained smile I knew too well. "Lex, this is a surprise." I smiled back, just wide enough. "You know me. I hate missing family milestones." I turned to the table of gifts and placed the envelope on top. Then I stepped to the side and stood silently, like a ghost with good posture. The party resumed hesitantly. Conversations picked back up, though more hushed. Bryn kept glancing in my direction, unsure whether to smile or flee. I waited until the toasts began. Astria clinked her glass. "To Bryn, for bringing light and joy into this family. For the future, for legacy, for—" I stepped forward, not rushed, not loud. I reached into my clutch and removed the second copy of the envelope, this one addressed directly to Dorian. He took it, confused, then opened it. His face changed slowly. First the squint of curiosity, then the tightening of his jaw. Then, silence. I turned to the crowd. "Some gifts," I said, voice steady. "Come wrapped in truth." A champagne flute shattered. I didn't look to see who dropped it. Vera opened her mouth but said nothing. Bryn stepped back. Her hand rested on her stomach protectively. I didn't linger. I didn't need to. I walked out as calmly as I came in. I didn't run. I didn't wait for reactions. I got into my car, adjusted the mirror, and looked at myself. The dress, the hair, the lipstick, all intact, but something was missing now. The weight, the unbearable weight of silence I'd carried for years. It was gone. And the morning after everything began to unravel for them, I woke up to 12 missed calls, 7 texts, 3 voicemails, all from Vera. I didn't need to press play to know the tone. I could already hear it. Her voice somewhere between frantic and forcefully composed, trying to walk that tightrope of motherly concern while still preserving her air of superiority. That peculiar blend of fear and control she always pulled out when things slipped from her hands. I let the phone buzz again as I stirred a spoonful of sugar into my coffee. No cream, just dark, hot, bitter, fitting for the week. At 6:31 a.m., she finally left the message I couldn't ignore. Not because of her words, but because of what her voice failed to hide. "Lex, sweetheart," she began, syrupy and brittle, like she hadn't spent the past year erasing me from every family photo. "Something's wrong with Harlan's pension. The account's frozen. We can't reach our contact at the firm. It's probably just a systems glitch, but we need your help." I nearly laughed aloud. Vera, who once referred to me as a polite addition to the Devane name like I was a decorative throw pillow, was now calling for tech support. I didn't call her back. By 8 a.m., the next call came in. Not from Dorian himself, of course. He wouldn't dare. It was his assistant, her voice soft and nervous. "Hi, Lex," she said. I just wanted to let you know Dorian's keycard isn't working this morning, and, well, HR has him listed as inactive in the system. He's kind of freaking out. Kind of. That was generous. I ended the call before she could spiral any further. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up again. This time it was a group text from Astria, sent to the family chain. Me, Vera, Dorian, a few cousins, aunts and hangers-on who still pretended they mattered. Astria. Is anyone else having trouble with vendor contracts or terminations this morning? This isn't funny. No one responded. Until I did. I sent a single emoji. The petty satisfaction of it hit just right. After everything, after the dinner parties where I was talked over, the vacations where I was excluded from group decisions, the holidays where I was just Dorian's wife, that emoji felt like a personal revolution. By noon, the group chat was imploding. Wall-to-wall confusion, scrambling, finger-pointing. Half explanations. Desperate questions like lifeboats tossed into a storm, and they still hadn't figured it out. The storm had a name, and it was mine. That evening, while they tore their nails trying to hold on to what they once believed was theirs, I was already preparing for the next day. Calm, precise. The annual shareholder meeting for Orion Holdings was scheduled. Venue booked, press briefed, security tight. My speech was memorized down to the breath. I had rehearsed it so often I could deliver it in reverse if needed. When I arrived the next morning, the ballroom buzzed like a hive. Investors mingled, reporters whispered, analysts hovered near the coffee stations, already sensing something seismic was about to hit. Backstage, I stood in a tailored charcoal suit, hair tied back, no jewelry except for my father's watch, a worn gold piece that ticked with quiet strength. My assistant handed me the printed press release. I scanned the headline one final time. "Release it," I said. Within moments, the news broke. Every major financial outlet posted the same story. After 8 years of strategic anonymous leadership, Lex Devane steps forward as CEO and majority shareholder of Orion Holdings. My name. In bold font. At the top, photos from the event hit social media within minutes. Me on stage, at the podium, shaking hands with Fortune 500 executives. Calm, composed, unapologetic. Dorian was tagged. Vera, too. Even Astria. The comments? Merciless. Didn't her family clown her for not working? Turns out she was the one holding all the cards. This is boss energy, no crumbs left. She's not a comeback story. She's the architect. I didn't need to scroll through every comment to know what had happened. The narrative had flipped. The same people who used to whisper behind their wine glasses that I was just a housewife were now scrambling to rewrite their own stories, trying to find a seat at a table I built in silence. By midday, Vera called again. I let it ring to voicemail. This time, there was no feigned softness. "Lex, this has gone far enough. You're tearing this family apart. We are not your enemies." I saved the message, labeled it delusional. Shortly after, Dorian's lawyer sent an email, vague legalese about reconsidering previous terms and coming back to the table as equals. Equals. That word actually made me laugh out loud. The man who once told me that I should be grateful for the life he built was now offering a seat at a table he never intended to share. Then came Astria's voicemail. Her voice was tight, trembling at the edges. "We didn't know it was you. We just thought you were playing house." Playing house. I saved her voicemail too, dropped it into a folder on my desktop titled Receipts. Then I replied to her with one line. "You played. I built the house. Send." That night, I poured a glass of red wine and stepped onto the balcony. The city glowed beneath me, glass and steel stretching out like a promise. The pavement was still wet from a brief evening rain, and the air carried that unmistakable scent, like static and starting over. I thought about all the dinners where they spoke over me, the meetings I wasn't invited to, the decisions made in rooms I wasn't allowed to enter. Now they were the ones knocking on locked doors, sending emails that bounced, making phone calls no one would answer. issuing statements they could no longer afford to spin. It was poetic. But I wasn't triumphant. I was still. I had been the silent engine behind their success, the strategist in the background, the analyst in the margins, the fixer they never acknowledged. And now they knew. Not through confrontation, not through revenge, through facts, through power made visible, through absence made intentional. Funny, isn't it? How silence can be a prison when it's forced on you, but a weapon when you wield it yourself. They used to think I was too quiet. Turns out I was just waiting for the right moment to speak. And now I speak through headlines. The building security called me before I even stepped into the lobby. "There's a man waiting downstairs. Said he knows you, flowers in hand, won't stop pacing." I didn't ask who. I already knew. I told them to let him wait. From my apartment on the 10th floor, I watched through the tinted glass as Dorian shifted his weight from foot to foot. He was dressed like he had somewhere to be, button-down shirt, clean-shaven, polished shoes, but the bouquet in his hand made him look like a teenager caught cheating before prom. I waited 20 more minutes before heading down. He spotted me instantly. "Lex," he said, relief flooding his face. "I was hoping you'd—" "What do you want?" I asked, stepping out of the elevator and not bothering to hide the flatness in my voice. He held out the bouquet like a peace offering. I was stupid. I didn't know what I had. I didn't touch the flowers. I didn't flinch. I looked at them like they were paperweights. "I'm not here to fix this," I said calmly. "I'm here because I knew you'd come eventually, and I wanted to hear what you'd say." He blinked. "I didn't mean for it to get this far. I just thought—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "You've made your point." There it was again, the phrase everyone kept using. As if my entire existence had become a thesis they didn't read but felt qualified to grade. "You made your point." I didn't respond. I turned and walked back toward the elevator. "Lex, please," he called. "I'm still your husband." "No," I said without turning around. "You were." Back upstairs, I found a package waiting by my door. No note on the outside, but I recognized the handwriting on the shipping label. Vera. I opened it in the kitchen, slowly, like I was unwrapping something from a stranger. Inside was a tiny silver bracelet, a baby name engraved in cursive. Not mine, not anyone I knew. And a folded letter. "Lex, we were scared. Families are messy. You know how it is. We didn't mean to shut you out. We just thought you were stronger. Let's talk soon. We're still family. Vera." I folded the letter and placed it back in the box. She thought guilt worked like a zipper. Pull it the right way, and everything opens up again. 10 minutes later, I received a voice message from Astria. "I don't know how everything got this far. We were trying to keep the family together. You made your point. Let's fix this. You're not the enemy." Same words. Different mouth. I went to my home office, opened my laptop, and pulled up the file I had labeled Closure. Inside was a document I had prepared weeks ago, just in case. Termination letters for all contracts connected to the Devane family. A formal statement dissolving all familial business ties. A legal cease and desist drafted by my attorney, stating that any further contact must go through legal channels. I attached the documents to separate emails and scheduled them to send at once. Subject line for each. I don't need to make a point. I made a choice. I pressed send. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I didn't sip wine and toast to revenge. I closed the laptop and made myself a sandwich. I sat at the kitchen island, humming a song I didn't realize I still remembered, and thought about how quiet freedom was. The next day, I was walking into my office building when the doorman stopped me. "There's someone waiting in the lobby for you," he said, lowering his voice. "He's upset." Dorian. Again. This time, he didn't have flowers. He looked like he hadn't slept. His collar was wrinkled, and there was a small coffee stain near his belt. He stood as I approached, face a blend of desperation and defensiveness. "You're really going to do this?" he asked. "I already did." "I didn't cheat to hurt you," he said quickly. "It just happened. We weren't even really a couple anymore. You were always working, distant." "And you were always lying," I said. He reached for my arm. I stepped back. You were supposed to love me, he said, voice cracking. Unconditionally. I met his eyes. Unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional stupidity. He blinked. The words landed like bricks. You always think you're the smartest person in the room, he said bitterly. No, I replied, just the quietest, and you thought that meant I was weak. I turned and walked away. He didn't follow. He didn't call again. I spent the afternoon at my desk, fielding client calls and approving contracts. No one asked about the Devane family. No one brought up the press coverage or the baby shower or the viral quote that someone had posted from my speech. But I knew they had read it. They were just smart enough to know I didn't owe them any more explanations. That evening, I poured myself a glass of water, opened the balcony doors, and sat beneath the soft hum of city lights. The breeze was light. The air smelled like rain was coming, but not yet. A kind of pause between seasons. Justice had been served. But healing? That would take its own time. It had been a little over a month since Dorian last tried to reach me. The final time we spoke, I didn't shout, plead, or ask for explanations. I simply hung a boundary in their face, a cease and desist, emotional and literal, and let it fall like a do not disturb sign over every door that once connected us. And then, silence. I wasn't sure if it was the real kind, the kind that speaks of true endings, or just the temporary hush before a fresh round of chaos. But days passed, then weeks, and nothing arrived at my doorstep. No more cryptic letters slid under my door, no curated playlists sent to my inbox, no long-winded voicemails searching for redemption in a trembling voice. Just quiet. One morning, I stopped by a small cafe downtown, the type you only find when you're not rushing. Its floor-to-ceiling windows poured sunlight onto old tile floors, and a hand-drawn chalkboard out front announced the day's specials like it was inviting you to exhale. I ordered a chai latte, my old favorite, forgotten in a whirlwind of arguments and apologies, and found a seat by the window. I opened a book I'd owned for years but never read. You know the kind. You buy it with the hope that someday, when things slow down, you'll finally have the time. That morning, I did. At the next table, a group of women in their late 20s were mid-conversation, voices fluttering with the excitement of gossip. Did you catch the podcast about Astria Devane's firm? One asked. Half their clients pulled out in 1 quarter, a total collapse. She tried to call it a strategic pivot, another added, laughing. But everyone knows it was PR cleanup after the scandal. I didn't flinch. I didn't join in. I just kept stirring the cinnamon froth in my latte. It was a moment that might have undone me once. But now, I was tired of bleeding for people who never noticed the cuts. Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from Naomi, a friend from college, still in finance. I hadn't heard from her in months, maybe more. The message was short. Naomi, saw Dorian on Hinge. Bio says, looking for something real. Sad. Once, that word would have landed like a punch to the ribs. Now, it barely made a ripple. Not because it didn't matter, but because it didn't drain me anymore. The emotion was still there, it just didn't have a cost. Later that day, I stopped by the local market on my way home. Nothing fancy, just picking up a few groceries. As I waited near the checkout line, I spotted someone familiar by the clearance aisle. Vera. She didn't see me, or maybe she did, but pretended otherwise. No makeup, no designer handbag, just a beige cardigan, holding a bottle of clearance lotion and a bag of decaf coffee. She looked, paused, like someone mid-thought, mid-life, who forgot where they were going. The luxury was gone, not just from her clothes, but from her energy. I didn't speak. I didn't move. Some endings don't need confrontation or closure. Some consequences wear silence instead of handcuffs. That Saturday, I picked up Lulu. The arrangements were all official now. Through a mediator, no spontaneous drop-offs, no group dinners, no awkward exchanges. Just me and a 7-year-old with strong opinions about everything from rainbow shoelaces to the correct way to eat a popsicle. She came running out of the ballet studio, her tights rumpled at the knees, a fresh Band-Aid on one leg. I crouched down to meet her. "Miss me?" I asked. She nodded but looked around, scanning for someone else. No one followed her. She stepped closer and whispered, "They told me not to talk to you." But I told them, I don't care. You're the only one who really sees me. That, that was the moment I thought would shatter me. But instead of breaking, I felt something stitched together. I hugged her tightly. She smelled like crayons and the kind of strawberry shampoo that comes in a bottle shaped like a fish. You look different, she said, squinting up at me. Different how? Just more like yourself. We spent the whole day doing nothing extraordinary, baking cookies, watching old musicals she only half understood, playing board games she kept cheating at and making new rules for as we went. It was noisy, messy, absolutely perfect. Sunday night, I dropped her off with a warm goodbye and walked home through streets I used to fear, too loud, too bright, too full of memories, but now they just felt right, familiar, but not suffocating. At the corner bookstore, the window display caught my eye, a themed table titled Women Who Rebuilt Themselves. And there I was, on the cover of a finance magazine. The headline, The New Faces of Leadership, Female CEOs Reshaping the Industry. I didn't cry, I didn't pose. I just walked inside and bought a single tulip from the flower stand by the register. Back in my apartment, I placed it in a slim glass vase on the windowsill. No applause, no validation, just a simple, beautiful thing to mark the moment. Then I poured a glass of water, kicked off my shoes, curled up on the couch with that book I still hadn't finished. Because healing wasn't a milestone. It wasn't an announcement or a single triumphant event. It was a decision, a quiet series of choices, not to go back, not to explain, not to reopen wounds just because they begged. Some wars don't end in fire and fury. Some just fade, like a door clicking shut behind you, and no one chasing after it. Sometimes, the loudest thing a woman can do is walk away without saying a word. This wasn't just about divorce, it was about reclaiming a life that had been quietly stolen, piece by piece. Lex didn't seek revenge through destruction. She let the truth do the talking. So here's a question. Have you ever stayed silent to keep the peace, only to realize the peace was never yours? If this story moved you, challenged you, or reminded you of your own strength, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We've got more true stories just like this, raw, real, and unforgettable.